What's up, STS Nation? We're back for the third time today. The second time was an accident, I think. Something mysterious happened with our link, and it literally disappeared on us. But we now have in the house Dr. John Delatorre, psychologist, a wizard of the mind. We've got Tara Malik, a wizard of legal briefs and everything related to anything legal out of Boise, Idaho. You have Tracy Walder, FBI and CIA, who knows the human mind and has seen a lot of insanity in her life in her own right, and can break down Lori Vallow Daybell. And of course, last but not least, we've got Lori Hellis, otherwise known as hashtag Good Lori. It has not started yet, as Laura Waldy is saying. We are waiting for this stream together as a community here. And again, we have no idea why in the world the link disappeared last time, but we should be good now. And we have not live streamed a verdict before. So we're going to try to do this together. First question goes to good Lori Hellis. First of all, congratulations, because your daughter is getting married and you're taking time off from that. So I know this is important to you. The wedding is obviously more important, but how are your nerves realizing we're about to get a verdict on a story that you've been following from literally the very, very beginning?
Well, I'm really excited. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm sitting outside, but I'm on a busy street. So
you sound great.
I'm excited that we're going to get a verdict, because I'd really like to get my book underway. So I'm looking forward to being able to really dig into it now.
Excellent. Tara, to you, Boise, what's the process right now? They said they're going to read this verdict live at 2:45, getting word via live Twitter that Lori is either on her way or making her way back to the courtroom. And then can you kind of just tell us what will happen once she gets in there?
Sure. Once Lori gets in there and once all the attorneys are in the courtroom as well, the judge will look over the verdict form that'll be handed up by the foreman, checked by the judge, and either the judge will read the verdict or the jury foreman will be asked to read the verdict. Prior to that, usually there's an admonition to everyone in the courtroom not to react. So no yelling, screaming, all of that. And most people know that, but it's a good reminder, especially in a case like this. And then we'll hear at the same time as everybody else the fate of Lori. Once the verdict is read, obviously, if it's a not guilty, she'll go through the process of walking out free. If it is guilty, then it will go to really the next stage, which is setting a date for the pre-sentence investigation that has to be ordered by the court. And that's a report that's put together. And all parties will get a copy of that report to prepare for sentencing. And it's a pretty in-depth profile of the individual. And then the court will also set a sentencing date and time.
Ready partner to bring your vision to life.
Our full spectrum of Space Coast Studios at LA is playing this. It appears it's about to start, everyone. So let's watch this together. Once Judge Boyce gets going, but this is a live look inside the Ada County Courthouse right now, live on Surviving the Survivor. You are looking at the courthouse. You can see there are a ton of people on the chat there on their YouTube channel, which we are simulcasting, which is how all the media outlets right now are simulcasting. Big shout out to Lil Mario, who runs Space Coast Studios out of Los Angeles. He is a wizard with all things technical and audio, and that is why we're going to be able to see this. You can see on the bottom Jim Archibald and Jim Thomas, and I think that's Lori there, if I'm seeing correctly. Lori Hellis is nodding her head in agreement. Wow. John Delatorre, obviously once they talk, we'll stop talking, but everyone's nerves are frayed. We're getting comments all day. How come, John Delatorre, Dr. D?
Well, in terms of us or in terms of Lori.
In terms of the world is watching, and the Lori Hellis is obviously she's more attached to this, but why are people around the world on the edge of their seats right now?
Well, I mean, it's the publicity associated with the curiosity that is Lori Vallow Daybell, right? Everyone is wondering, is she real? Is she fake? Oh, we got some action.
Yep. Let's take a listen together, everyone.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Mario, you can put the volume up a little, please. Perfect.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are going on the record. Madam Court Reporter, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, thank you. This is case CR 22-21-1624, State of Idaho versus Lori Vallow. The matter before the court today is for a verdict in the jury trial that's been conducted over the last several weeks in this case. The court will note on the record, prosecution is here represented by Mr. Wood, Ms. Blake, and Ms. Smith. The defense, Mr. Archibald, Mr. Thomas are present, as well as the defendant who is present. The court's been advised that the jury has reached a verdict at this time. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. Let's have the jurors brought in, please. While the jurors are being brought in, I'd like to indicate that this matter is being live streamed on the court's YouTube channel. In addition, the court's existing conduct order is in effect, and everyone needs to comply with that conduct order. This verdict has several counts. The court is going to require that all in attendance abstain from any sort of loud outbursts or sounds that could in any way affect the proceedings in this matter as the counts are read in the verdict. And I expect to maintain order and decorum as has been the case throughout this trial with those in attendance. So please keep that in mind once we get to this stage of these proceedings. So with that in mind, if the jurors are ready, they can be seated.
All right, please. Jury's all present, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right, the court will note that we had alternate jurors that were excused upon deliberations. So now the remaining 12 jurors who have deliberated are here and appear to all be properly seated. Will counsel stipulate that the jury is all present and properly seated in the state?
Yes, Your Honor.
Will the defense will stipulate?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, at this time, the court will inquire then from the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yeah.
Very well. If you have the verdict form, I'd ask the bailiff bring that over here and we'll have it brought to the clerk to be read. All right, the court has reviewed the verdict form, find that it's been properly completed, signed and dated. So at this time, I'll direct the clerk to please read the verdict into the record. The defendant would please rise.
in the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the State of Idaho and for the County of Fremont, State of Idaho plaintiff versus Lori Vallow, aka Lori Daybell, defendant, case number CR 22211624. Verdict. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn to try the above entitled action for our verdict, unanimously answer the questions submitted to us as follows. Question number 1. In regards to count 1 of the amended indictment, is Lori Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty. Question number 2. In regards to count 2 of the amended indictment, is Lori Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan? Answer, guilty. Question number 3. In regards to count 3 of the amended indictment, is Lori Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty. Question number 4. In regards to count 4, the amended indictment, is Lori Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow? Answer, guilty. Question number 5. In regards to count 5 of the amended indictment, is Lori Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell? Answer, guilty. Question number 6. In regards to count 7 of the amended indictment, is Lori Vallow not guilty or guilty of grand theft? Answer, guilty. Dated this 12th day of May, 2023, signed by the presiding officer.
All right, please be seated. Madam Clerk, thank you for reading the verdict into the record. At this time, let me just inquire of the jury, is this in fact your true and correct verdict?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Let me ask now from counsel, does the state wish to have the jury polled?
We do not, Your Honor.
Does the defense wish to have the jury polled?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, the jury will be polled at this time. Madam Clerk, if you would please indicate only by juror numbers of each of the jurors if this is their true and correct verdict individually.
Juror number 4, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 5, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 6, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 8, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 9, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 10, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 11, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 12, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 13, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 14, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 15, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 16, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. The court does find it's a unanimous verdict in this case, so I will direct the clerk to record the verdict into the record of this case. I'll now have a closing jury instruction for our jurors and also those alternate jurors that are in attendance today. You have now completed your duties as jurors in this case and are discharged with the sincere thanks of this court. The question may arise as to whether you may discuss this case with the attorneys or with anyone else. For your guidance, the court instructs you that whether you talk to the attorneys or to anyone else is entirely your own decision. It is proper for you if you want to, but you are not required to do so, and you may choose not to discuss the case with anyone at all. If you choose to talk to someone about the case, you may tell them as much or little as you like about your deliberations or the facts that influenced your decision. If you decide to discuss the case with anyone, you should be careful to respect the privacy and feelings of your fellow jurors. You should limit your comments to your own perceptions and feelings. If anyone persists in discussing the case over your objections or becomes critical of your service either before or after any discussion has begun, please report that to me. This time, then, the court offers its sincere thanks to the jurors. I appreciate your patience and attentiveness throughout this lengthy trial. I also thank you again for upholding your important civic duty as jurors in this case. I'd also like to thank the attorneys who tried this case for your professionalism throughout the proceedings and in the pretrial motions that came before trial. At this time, then, the court will discuss briefly sentencing in this case. In Idaho, pursuant to Title 19, Chapter 25, a report is required to be prepared before sentencing called a pre-sentence investigation report. In a typical case, that report takes at least 2 months to prepare. In a case such as this, it will likely take longer. The court will inquire as to a pre-sentence investigator for the time frame required to prepare the report in this case. Upon getting an estimation, then the court will reach out to counsel for determining a date for sentencing. I'll just advise everyone that will likely be, I'm thinking, at least 3 months probably before that sentencing can be scheduled to have the report completed. The court will also advise at this time then, upon conclusion of the proceedings, the defendant will be remanded back to custody of the Ada County Sheriff at this time to be transferred to the Fremont County Sheriff for further proceedings in Fremont County for sentencing. The court will also instruct the clerk to collect any of the jurors' notes pursuant to Idaho Criminal Rule 24.1A. At this time, then, the court will ask that the jurors and any alternates in attendance be excused from the courtroom. And I am going to direct that all in attendance here remain seated until such time as the jurors have been completely exited from the courtroom. And in addition, I'll let the jurors know there is additional information you'll be receiving through the court administration offices on your way out as you leave today. So again, thank you for your service. Court will be adjourned. And Mr. Bailiff, if you could have all rise for your jury.
All rise, please.
All right, thank you, counsel. Thank you, everyone, for your decorum this afternoon. Court is adjourned.
Judge, when would you like me to open the doors for?
And with that, Lori Vallow Daybell is headed first to the Fremont County Sheriff's Office, remanded back into custody there per Judge Stephen Boise, and will be spending very likely, although there was no sentencing today, the rest of her natural life behind bars in a state prison somewhere in Idaho after 6 weeks. Today is coming up on next week would have been the 7th week and 6th week of testimony, 7th week since 6th week of testimony, and the 7th week since the jury was selected. But Lori Vallow Daybell will likely, again, never see the light of day. Guilty on all charges, starting with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception of Tylee Ryan. Guilty. First-degree murder of Tylee Ryan. Guilty. Conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception of J.J. Vallow. Guilty. First-degree murder of J.J. Vallow. Guilty. Conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell. Guilty. And conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception of Tammy Daybell. Guilty. The 12 jurors in the courtroom, they put in quite a public service here, spending these 6 weeks, listening to testimony and coming to this final conclusion. Tara Malik, the only lawyer on the panel, as I look around, good Lori had to hop off. Anything here surprise you? Was it a just verdict?
Well, I think it was certainly a just verdict. Nothing surprising there. I think, as we've been talking and seeing the evidence unfold by the prosecution in this case, They did a really nice job of kind of slowly building to their conclusion and then wrapping everything up with a bow during their closing arguments and revisiting the motive that they had and theme of the case that they had started in their opening statements. So, it's I think a lot of people will feel a lot of relief. It was interesting to see Lori's reaction of crossing her arms across her chest, and I'm sure Dr. De La Torre is going to have some observations on that, which I won't be able to read into it, but it was an interesting sign to be sure. I don't think I've ever seen anyone cross their arms quite like that when a jury verdict is read. So.
Yeah, and excellent observation. It is hard to believe that after all this time, that was the first live look we had inside the courtroom, seeing Lori Vallow Daybell and her attorneys by her side, as well as Judge Stephen Boyce and the prosecutors. A job well done, obviously, by the state in this case. It was a pretty wide shot and not the best quality shot. But Dr. John De La Torre, just picking up on what Tara said, it did appear that Lori Vallow had her arms crossed almost in a position of disgust, with her head, her chin up a tiny bit in the air as she sort of looked at the judge as this verdict was being read. What did you make of that, being a person who studies the human mind?
I mean, what were we to expect from her? I mean, it wasn't like she was just going to break down and start crying and throwing herself at the mercy of the court right then and there. Like that was never going to happen, because I never think that she truly believes that what she did was wrong. And I do believe that the people who question her, I think she thinks that they're always going to be wrong, that she's just misunderstood and no one truly gets her other than Chad.
And so Lori Noreen Vallow Daybell, Roger Rhoades, will be spending the rest of her natural life almost certainly behind bars. Roger Rhoades, if that was me, I'd be weeping. What is she doing right now, Dr. Raj?
She's upset. I think she thought they would be in the cult of Lori. She had been a cult leader. She thought she could cult leader the court, and she found out reality hit her.
Right in the behind. We all have to,
big kick in the hiney.
We all have to chip in and get good old Raj a better Wi-Fi connection. We had to get Gary Bricado, who studies serial killers. We had to get him a microphone, but poor Roger Rhoades' Wi-Fi connection. He's always stuck, but his audio is good, so I'll take it. Tracy Walder, to you, from an investigative standpoint, we don't know yet what part this hair that was found played in the jury's decision. Could be a big part. It could be minor. I'm sure we will hear from these jurors as soon as this weekend. What do you make of this big moment in court today?
It's interesting. I figured that she would be found guilty regarding the murders of JJ and Tylee, but I was sort of on the fence in regards to the evidence that was really presented regarding Tammy. I didn't think they did a bad job per se. I just think when they had her hair on JJ's duct tape, you really can't come back from that, right? Like that is, in my opinion, something that's going to really sway a jury if there was any doubt in their mind. And they didn't have that necessarily, smoking gun moment in regards to Tammy, though I always felt that she was guilty of conspiracy and that. So that was the one I was sort of iffy on. But, I am more sure that this woman is guilty than I was even sure in the Murdaugh case. And the Murdaugh case, in my opinion, was more of a forensic disaster in terms of how it was presented than this case. And, I know I'm not a psychologist, but her crossing her arms was so not surprising to me. The turning point video, at least for me, with her, was actually the Netflix documentary. If you watch, after she had the police called on her for being sort of mentally ill and they wanted a hold, she manipulated that whole police department to basically buy what she was selling, that it was her husband's fault. I think that the girl thought she could manipulate the jury, and she, whatted around and found out, and this is what happens. And she couldn't manipulate the jury.
I smell another graphic t-shirt. What it around, Tracy Walder. John De La Torre. Tracy, not letting the expletive fly. Dr. John Delatorre. So this jury, it's a jury of our peers. It's people just like me and you in there. They spent close to coming up on 7 weeks, getting paid, I think, $5 or $10 a day, 10 for a full day, 5 for a half day. Psychologically, what is it like for them after this big moment? They came to their decision. You've got the fate of a human being in your hands. So, what kind of heaviness does that carry with it?
The heaviness, I think, comes from the victims in this case, right? And every victim in every case has a different weight associated with it. Now, that's not to say that one life is more or less than another, but in this case, what was presented, the evidence presented, the way that JJ, the way that everybody died, right? Asphyxiation, burning, right? Being taped across the map, the way that they all died. I think that really weighed heavily, and the jury really wanted to do right by the victims in this case. And so thinking through, but they also wanted to do it well, right? So they did, it wasn't just rash. They gave themselves a night to think. They really wanted the opportunity for their message, their verdict, to come across as if they are providing justice to the people who cannot ask for it, right? The victims in this case.
And Tara, from a legal standpoint, what happens next? Every state's different, every jurisdiction is different, but do we have any idea when sentencing will be? I didn't catch that if Boyce mentioned it, but will it be a matter of days, weeks, months, and will her defense team inevitably file an appeal, do you think?
So he didn't give, the judge did not give a sentencing date right now. And the reason for that is prior to sentencing, what has to occur is that a pre-sentence investigation report has to be put together. And this is a report that is pretty intensive, and it has different categories in it. So Lori will actually sit down with someone, an investigator who is charged with doing these reports, and they'll go through her entire life history. So they're going to talk about her childhood. They're going to look at any criminal records that she has. They're going to talk about her substance abuse with her, and she has to be honest as part of the process. We'll see how honest she is or whether she minimizes. They'll go through any sort of mental health history. All of that gets compiled into this report. And that report then gets shared with the defense attorneys, it gets shared with the prosecutors, and it gets shared with the judge. And then after that report is compiled and everyone has an opportunity to look at it, the defense attorneys can make any corrections, as can the state, to that report. If there's errors, if there's, misstatements in there. Once that process happens, then we get to the sentencing. And at sentencing, obviously this is a case with, family victims who are still involved. So they would have the opportunity to present victim impact statements. Lori would have the opportunity to present any sort of testimony or witness statements as to her character. And so sentencing is going to be a big deal. So it's going to take a couple of months to get that pre-sentence investigation completed. And then it's going to take a little bit of time too for the actual sentencing to move forward. And once the judge hears from both sides regarding the pre-sentence investigation, any testimony that they want to put on or statements that they want to put on from both sides, then the court will enter in the sentence. As far as whether or not I think there will be an appeal, I think there will absolutely be an appeal. I would be surprised if there weren't an appeal. Prior to an appeal, though, they can move for what's called Rule 35 relief. So if the sentence is something that, defense believes is excessive or, it's too much and they want the court to reconsider, Rule 35 is a motion for leniency. So they can go back to the court and ask under Rule 35 for a more lenient sentence. And the judge could grant it or deny it. And then they have a certain amount of days after the sentence to make an appeal with the Court of Appeals.
STS Nation weighing in. Jeannie Castellano and her husband Jimmy, friends of the show. Happy Mother's Day. Hope you suffer a miserable life in prison. Followed by the clap emoji. Interesting here. All the peeps in her prison best be watching their backs. That might be a good idea. Marina in the south of Spain. With clap emoji. And here's an interesting comment. We had Wendy Murphy on, who didn't know if there was enough direct evidence for guilty verdicts here. And Roxanne says we won the bet against guest Wendy, the attorney, who was a scholar at Harvard teaching there. She said Lori would be found innocent. No. And today that is the case. Just to be fair, Gene Fisher, who worked in the Ada County prosecutor's office, very openly on the show last night, said she was convinced would be guilty in terms of the conspiracy charges, but she had some questions herself about the actual murder charges. But today we find out that, in fact, it is guilty on all counts. Dr. Roger Rhoades, I'm going to unmute you here. Why this sort of reaction from STS Nation and the rest of the world? What do you think?
Common sense. I'm telling you right now, if it walks like a duck and it flies like a duck and it swims like a duck, dude, it's a duck. That's all they said. They saw everything not legally correct, but common sense correct. They said, she's guilty. She looks guilty. She acts guilty. In common sense world, she's guilty. So what the Harvard lady was saying legally, are all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted? No, but your people are saying, wait a minute, that doesn't matter. She's guilty. I agree.
Raj is the best. Tracy, is that problematic though? I mean, you're a person that served your nation in the CIA. You're in the FBI. Raj makes the argument that it's common sense, but he kind of implies that they're working off of emotion. Does that concern you at all in terms of the jury making their decision? It's hard to keep that out, though, isn't it?
I totally get where Roger is coming from, and I agree, but I don't think that a jury makes their recommendations solely on emotion. We always know that's going to factor in. None of us are robots, right? They're not going to see those pictures of JJ and Tylee and not have some kind of a reaction to that. I do not think that they made this solely based on emotion, because here's the thing. If they made this solely based on emotion, it would be very easy for all of us to say that we somewhat disagree with this verdict, because a lot of us are more sort of forensic fact-based folks. And so, the reality is that, and I keep going back to it, that hair was a nail in the coffin for her, because I even had my questions. I thought she would be found guilty on conspiracy at least, but that put her at the scene of the crime. I don't know how you explain away the fact that your hair is on the plastic bag that was used to suffocate your son. That put her at the scene of the crime. So regardless of whether or not their emotions played into it, which 100% that they did, I think prosecutors and defense attorneys know this. They know that they're dealing with human beings, and they're going to make sure that they present evidence to either appeal sometimes to that emotion and knowing what people might say, or to kind of counteract that.
John Delatorre, two questions for you. First, would more dead bodies be piling up, in your opinion, if Lori and Chad weren't behind bars right now? Because someone said, watch your back in prison.
Yes. Although it's not that I think that they're serial killers and that they're targeting their next victim upon completion of their previous victim. No, I don't think that at all. I do think that in their lives, they become very impulsive as to what they want. And if they find someone that is an obstacle for them getting what they want, they will most likely be plotting that individual's demise. So I do think that there would be more dead bodies. Yes.
Laura Waldy says, I'm so happy for Kay and Larry. They have been waiting so long for this. Larry, his health is in a little bit of question right now. By the way, there was a line around the courthouse from what I'm hearing this morning at like 4 a.m. This was a big day. People thought the verdict would come down. It did. And so the public was out there as well. John, just back to you on this. This is really about the victims, and sometimes we forget about this because, true crime gets hyped up. It becomes this whodunit, this drama. But what kind of relief must this be for the victims after all this time? And I don't know, is there a sense of a letdown maybe, because it's sort of it's a win, but it's not really a win.
I think that depends on how they view winning, because I certainly think that the grandparents have a real sense of relief. I think this was the moment that they had been waiting for to get this verdict in. So I do think there's no such thing as closure, is what I'll say, right? So the family members will never feel closed off. And we've still got Chad's family to deal with, and that's a whole other discussion. But I don't think that there's closure for them, but I do think that there is a sense of justice. Now, that sense can keep them going for a little while at least, but I do think that they should be seeing a mental health professional, because the wave of the loss and the grief that they're going to experience is going to wash over them multiple times throughout their life.
Well said. And speaking of Chad, Cheryl McKay from Canada says, "Oh, Chad." And then this comment here from LZ, I don't know. I'm sure I'm saying whatever. "Guilty on all counts," she says. "Wonder what Chad is going to do. Hopefully he gets a plea deal so we don't have to deal with this mess again." Reading these names are trying to figure out license plates sometimes. So forgive me. But Tara, to you, so John Pryor, Chad Daybell's attorney, he was in court as recently as yesterday. I'm not sure if he was in there today. What are they thinking right now? Are they thinking, "Oh crap, we're in trouble"? Or are they thinking, "Let's run Lori over, back and forth and just throw her under the bus"? What happens now?
Well, I certainly think that they're looking at this verdict, guilty on all counts, and going, well, it's not going to be better for Chad. In a lot of ways, and we've talked about this before, Lori Vallow's team could have thrown Chad under the bus and made her out to look like the victim. They didn't do that until closing arguments, and it was an ineffective way of doing it. But all of that to say that I think, there's going to be even less skepticism or, empathy for Chad in this situation. Now, I don't know that the prosecution will offer a deal. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll, take death penalty off the table and negotiate with that. But at this point in time, as the prosecution, you already know, you've kind of previewed your case against Chad. You've had one set of individuals, the jury, come back and say guilty on all counts. And as of the two of them, I think the case against Lori was a little bit harder because of the circumstantial nature, because of the fact that, she was kind of on the fringe, and then we had this hair, which was a great piece of evidence. But I don't think this bodes well for Chad at all.
And Tracy, feel free to add on to that. But Charles Vallow is dead in Arizona. Is this investigation over, or is it still very active in spite of the fact that there's now a guilty verdict for Lori?
That's an interesting question, and I thought about that too. And Tara, I totally agree with you. And I'm wondering what you think. I'm wondering if the only plea deal that's going to be offered is just simply taking death penalty off the table, and if he doesn't take it, no deal. We know we can win this because the bodies were found on your property. Period. The end. But in terms of Charles, I think it kind of goes back to the good doctor's point about this closure and justice for the families. Because, look, we know that Lori may not have pulled the trigger in that case, but to what extent was she involved? And I think now that we have a guilty verdict here, it will make it much easier for the folks, I believe it's Maricopa County, but I could be wrong, to go ahead and proceed with moving forward in this case. I think she would be tried more as a conspirator. I don't think she'd be looking at sort of, a first degree murder charge here, but I do think really to Dr. De La Torre's point that it's about the victim in this case and about their families. And I think they want that closure and that sense of justice.
Joel, if I could jump in here, because I kind of want to hear what Tara what Tara thinks about this. I think, we forget that pre-trial stuff, there was not this, the prosecution didn't do the appropriate discovery, right? They didn't release the discovery. So the death penalty was taken off by the judge in Lori's case, right? And so, Tara, I'm thinking about what would this jury, what would they have been thinking? How would their verdict? Maybe it wouldn't have changed. Maybe I don't know. But if that was there for Lori, do we still have the same verdict that we have because it was taken off?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the jury is instructed, and there's an admonition in the jury instructions as well that they are not to consider sentencing at all. That can't come into their deliberations. It's completely the province of the judge and not the jury to do that. Now, were they aware of it, that the death penalty was taken off the table? And I mean, I could speculate all day about that and whether that, swayed their decision one way or another, maybe. But as it relates to Chad, I just, I think there's always a risk with a jury. You're rolling the dice. And, when I'm advising clients and we're talking about whether or not to go to trial, it's like, you do the best you can, you put on the best case that you can, but then you're rolling the dice and it's up to a decision maker. And it's, in this case, it's a jury. So there is always some risk that you'll have a holdout on a jury. And that is something that I'm sure the state is considering, and they consider every time they make a plea deal or make a plea offer. And so, they may or may not choose to bargain with that. I don't know. I think this crime was so depraved and heinous in so many ways that even if the death penalty had been on the table, there's a part 2 for sentencing and for death penalty cases where they have to prove certain elements in order to get the death penalty. I'm not sure that this would have made a difference for this particular jury, just because it was just such a gruesome crime that was committed here against 2 children.
Marina weighing in from the south of Spain. Vanilla Pudding Chad, I like that name actually, is going to take a plea like the little bee that he is. These people are monsters. They are awful. Followed by Tali in Israel. Woo-wee. So we're going to Raj, who appears frozen, but hopefully there he is.
Buddy.
Hey, Raj. So, after you get hyped up for the World Series or the Super Bowl, and then there's always a little letdown the next day, a little emotional letdown because there's high drama involved. Can the same be said of this? People who've been following this case incredibly closely wake up tomorrow with a verdict and it's all over. It just ended. Is there a sense of, I don't know, emptiness or a feeling that what I was so attuned to and watching so closely now has some finality? What do you think?
No, Chad, game 2. That's what they're not gonna have a letdown. They're waiting to, licking their lips for the next court case. And
that's going to be coming soon. What do you think, Raj, since I have your ear, knowing Chad and knowing Lori, the little that you do, but just from what you obviously see in the media, do you think that he is going to turn against Lori? We had Sky Borgman on, the director of Sins of Our Mother, the Netflix doc about this, and she, weeks ago, she may have changed her stance, but she thought that Chad would definitely turn on Lori. But apparently Lori was upset with the closing arguments, and we can talk about that too, that they threw Chad under the bus. So first, do you think that Chad will throw Lori under the bus given the chance?
The difference is kind of guilty and real guilty. If he does, they'll real guilty him. If he doesn't, they'll kind of guilty him. But he's gonna, I can tell you this, no matter what happens, he's gonna look after Chad. He's never seeing Lori again. Lori's never seeing him again. He's pro Chad.
And Dr. D. Delatorre, to you, there were reports that Lori was upset with Jim Archibald's closing arguments because they took real shots at Chad. I mean, they pointed the finger at him and basically him alone. What did you make of that? Do you believe these reports? Do you think she actually really cares about him and that there's true love here?
I think we need to be careful with true love, but I do think that there was true lust. I do think that there was true obsession. I do think that the two of them found themselves in a relationship that they really, no one else could be a partner for either one of these individuals. So I do believe that, and I do believe that Lori would not have been happy. Right. If these rumors were true about how that closing argument went, I do believe that she would not have been happy with Chad's name being presented the way that it was. I think the two of them saw themselves as a Bonnie and Clyde kind of relationship, that, you know, the whole world was against both of them, and that no one understood their love or anything like that. So I do think that it is possible that this rumor about her not wanting Chad, just being put in a negative light, really sat well with her.
Tara, to you from Mary Goff, could Lori appeal due to zero defense on her behalf? Is that one of the arguments that could be made?
Well, it's a post-conviction issue. And yes, it's called ineffective assistance of counsel. I don't know that there's zero defense, but it certainly, what she could come and say is they didn't cross-examine effectively. They didn't, put on a particular witness. So yes, she could make those. That would be in a post-conviction relief arena, which is a separate action. In fact, it's governed by the civil rules instead of the criminal rules. And that would be at a time after her sentencing.
Polka Dot says, I think she looked defiant. Dr. Rhoades,
Yes.
If you were on the fly on the wall and Lori Vallow was talking to herself in her jail cell right now, what is she saying to herself right now, Dr. Rhoades?
What a bunch of idiots she had to deal with. And she's figuring out a way to get out of jail at this moment.
Do you think she believes she will be freed?
Yeah. She believes she's God. That's the bottom line. And can God get out of jail? You bet. Can Lori get out of jail? You bet.
In her mind, obviously.
Right. She's not. Wait a minute. Both those people are not well. What we're really talking about, we were talking about them getting together. Ooh, let's please remove love. And let's talk about the mixture of one kind of poison mixed with another kind of poison. They were birds of a feather and they flew together. What a nightmare.
Raj, look at this comment from Axeman Gang. Lori was saying, anticipating what you were saying, you puny humans cannot judge me. I am a goddess and I can, I guess, not care what you say. Do you agree? Do you agree with that?
Totally. There we go. Somebody's got an idea of what's going on. This is they're other world people. They're in the ether of real life. And
Raj, this is where I get tripped up. I have 3 kids. I can hear them out back right now, and I want to take care of that because I can hear them while I'm podcasting. They'll be properly dealt with after this show, but you guys can't hear them, but I can. But here's my point. How could anyone? I just can't wrap my head around. I mean, how could? And I understand a lot of things in life, but how do you kill your own children? How is one supposed to relate to this in any way or understand how she could get to this point?
They can't, because if you believe your children are real people and you're real people, that's going to be a problem. She was a god. They were in the way. Done. Put a period at the end of that sentence. That's Lori in Chad's world. What can God do? God do anything. What could they do? They do anything. But see, we're trying as humans to say, well, if I'm a human parent and they're human children, how could they kill them?
By the way, I said Dr. Rhoades was going to be bigger than Dr. Phil, but I'm starting to think he's going to be bigger than he's going to be bigger than Oprah, I think, one of these days.
I can say I've been on Oprah, if that means anything.
It sure does, Rod. That's a beginning. That's a beginning.
I'm creeping in, dude. I've got to go to therapy. You guys take care. I'm disappointed we haven't had any cussing. That's letting me down, but hey.
Rod, you're going to be on with us Sunday night. Thank you for joining.
I look forward to it.
All right, thank you. We're discussing Sunday night, by the way. We are live at 7 p.m. Eastern time with Dr. Roger Rhoades and Greg Skordas on that case out of Utah. The woman who murdered her husband, accused of that, was just arrested for it. And she wrote a children's book about grief and dedicated the book to her husband who had passed away. And she, turns out, killed him, according to authorities. So Greg Skordas is he's a best guest, and he is the attorney for the husband, the victim's family, and he's going to join us with Dr. Roger Rhoades. So please join us Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Dr. John Delatorre, we'll go a few more minutes and we'll wrap this up just to get around this. Okay. All right, Tracy. Thank you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Down. And then there were two. Dr. John, again, I know you're going to echo pretty much what Dr. Rhoades just said, but how can anyone begin to comprehend what this woman did and was able to do it and seem today with her arms crossed to have no remorse? Like she, didn't seem upset. She seemed angry at the decision.
Well, I think we're trying to apply our common sense to what's going on inside someone who doesn't view the world the way that we do. Now, I agree with Dr. Roger when it comes to, at that point, you no longer see the victims as human beings. They're merely objects for you to do whatever it is that you want to do with. But I think the real question that we're trying to get to, that we're trying to answer is, what must have been leading up to that? And that's a descent into delusional type thinking. It's a descent into madness, right? It's a descent into ideas that you don't think about as a typical human being. And so there's something outlandish that's going on inside of this person. Levels of anxiety and distress that they're trying to manage through money, power, and sex, right? As described by the prosecution theory. They're trying to manage all of this kind of stuff. And when individuals, and it doesn't matter who they are, but when individuals get in the way of dealing with those anxieties and stressors, when they get in the way of that, then you can't view them as human beings anymore. And that's where we have to start detaching this idea that Lori was a mother. At that point, she was no longer a mother to these children. She was just whatever she believed herself to be, and they were an obstacle that she needed to overcome.
That was one of our thumbnail titles, Obstacles, and that came straight out of the arguments from the state. Amontillado writes, John, right back to you on this. I do not understand why people are cheerful to celebrate someone's destiny. Does not heal any wounds from loss or the suffering of it. Verdict is no surprise. Why does it seem that some people are, actually gleeful at this?
We need an opportunity to release the emotions that we're going through when it comes to our perception of the experience, right? So if we're experiencing a ton of anxiety, if we're experiencing a ton of sadness and a ton of grief based on what we're taking in, we need an outlet, right? We need to relieve this kind of thing. And for us, right, when it comes to true crime watchers or when it comes to just our justice system, it is the verdict, right? Because it's made up of 12 jurors that are regular, everyday people, right? Because it's made up of people that we can see ourselves in and we can say, hey, that's the exact same decision that I would have made. It becomes celebratory at that moment. It's an opportunity for us to have a catharsis, if you want to go Freudian about it. It's a catharsis to release all of the negative things that were going on inside of us.
Very interesting. And this is really interesting to me from Ramona B. Arms are crossed like that for Mormon prayer. Y'all are just reading that position wrong based on lack of LDS knowledge. She was praying, followed by David. Just Googled it. Crossed arms are indeed a Mormon prayer pose. Wow. learn something new every day in this case. If that is in fact true, I think we all stand corrected. What about that, Dr. John Delatorre? Is it surprising, and I'm assuming this is true, would it surprise you that she was possibly praying in that moment?
Would it surprise me that she's praying? No, it wouldn't surprise me that she's praying. But I think, you know, we have to consider context as well. What was the situation that was at play? It's certainly possible that after she heard all of the guilties, that's the moment that she decided to pray. That's certainly possible. I don't know that based on the evidence that has been presented about Lori, that she's really the kind of person that feels the need to pray. I think she believes herself to be the person that people pray to, not the person that needs to pray.
Tar, to you from Wolf Girl. I don't know if you know the answer to this, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I do it all the time. Are Lori and Chad allowed to write to each other in prison? I believe I heard that they're not allowed to have any contact, but you can write letters. Do you know if they are able to do that?
I'm sure they're being advised by their respective attorneys not to have any contact with each other, especially given the charges here and the conspiracy charges. Any communication while you're in custody, whether it's phone calls, we've all heard of jail phone calls, or even letters, are subject to review and search by the police and the jail staff. So if they are, it's against likely the advice of their respective counsel.
I love this comment. Little known fact, Dr. Roger Rhoades is the founder and chancellor of Duck University, whose motto is looks, walks, and swim like a duck. Woo-wee, it's a duck. Tara, you were a prosecutor. The state won today. I mean, it was a long, windy road for them, but they prevailed, and they started opening statements talking about money, power, and sex. They obviously did a good job tying it all back because they got the verdict that they were looking for. What goes into this for the state, and what kind of victory and feeling is it for them on a day like today?
Well, a lot of work. I mean, especially in a case where, you know, it's based on a lot of circumstantial evidence. They have to put all of these puzzle pieces together and paint the picture and convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a really high bar, as it should be when we're talking about potentially taking away someone's freedoms. And so, you know, I have no doubt that there were many, you know, sleepless nights trying to figure out the best way to present this, you know, countless hours with prepping each one of their witnesses, especially their expert witnesses. You know, it's not easy to make strategy calls, and some of these things like the order in which to present the evidence, the themes that you're going to use in the case are all strategy decisions, not to mention trying to juggle and get your evidence in using the rules of criminal procedure. So they really did a really nice job. And I'm sure they were greatly relieved when they heard the verdict. But, you know, these prosecutors are very experienced. They know that this isn't the end. And they know that it's probably very likely that Lori will be appealing, and they still have Chad to deal with. So, you know, there will be, you know, I'm sure a brief celebration, and then they're going to get right back to work again.
Tara, to you, Susan Silver, and we'll wrap in just a couple minutes. I'll be interested to hear from the jurors as to which evidence was the most impactful. I'm thinking hair on the duct tape and the jail calls, and that's followed by this comment from Man Nam. The hair was on the tape on the outside of the bag around the body. In other words, it was not a stray hair from prior use, that earlier part of tape on the body inside the bag. Was there anything that really stood out to you in the state's evidence against Lori that you think really swayed the jurors one way or the other? Or was it just like the cumulative evidence, the amount of evidence, the amount of smoke surrounding her?
You know, I think ultimately that hair evidence was, I would venture to guess, the tipping point for the jury. I know it was for me. I mean, that is pretty strong evidence. And the fact that it wasn't on the pajamas, it wasn't on an exterior piece of clothing, but in fact, it was on the tape that was wrapped around the plastic that covered JJ's body is is really significant. I think the place where we found the hair was really a monumental piece of evidence that is very persuasive. And the defense really didn't do a great job of explaining how it could get there. I think in their closing arguments, they tried to muddy the waters a little bit and just say the hair was found and, on JJ somewhere. And then the prosecution in their rebuttal had clarified, no, it was found on the tape, different than on the pajamas. So I think that plus, the timeline of events that the prosecution put together, the motive, and then her behavior certainly didn't help either. So the fact that this prosecution could answer the question of why would she do this? What was the motivation to do this? And then also explain the how it was probable that she was a part of this whole thing. I think they did just a tremendous job.
Jane Ferguson, Dr. John Delatorre, I so wish I could have seen her face up close. It was a wide shot. What do you think is going on in her mind right now? I mean, is she just like an empty vessel, or is she indignant? Is she praying? If you had to guess, what do you think?
If I had to get, I'm gonna say empty vessel, but I don't think I mean it the way that you mean it. I don't think that. I think she's detached, right? I think that she is suppressing all of the negative and vulnerable emotions that she should be feeling, having been found guilty of killing her children. But she's not willing to experience it because it cannot be real for her. None of what happened, the verdict, where she is, none of this can be real for her. And so for that, she is doing what she can, putting in a lot of effort, I would imagine, to remain detached from any intense emotion that she should be feeling, and instead of just confronting it and admitting to everything that she's done. So it's not that I think that she's an empty vessel, but I think she's purposefully ignoring having intense emotions that she should be having.
Well put. Interesting too. Vera Ribera. Joe, even though it's Joel, you beat most of not all YouTube podcasts and channels, including major ones, which I will not mention. You had the live stream, the best panel for commentaries. We always have the best guests. I also probably lost about 3 pounds burning calories trying to get this all going, but it is a work in progress. And the next verdict, we will be a well-oiled machine. Still might take it all out of my kids, but maybe not. Michelle Pretorius in South Africa. I find this so incredibly sad. Every day is a great day for justice to be served, but all the lives lost, Lori's too, even though she brought this upon herself, it is extremely sad. Dr. John Delatorre, I mean, this is a great point. At the end of the day, we're talking about the deaths of 2 young children, the death of devoted wife for 30 years to Chad Daybell. It's really just sad, right?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely sad. And the commenter is correct. Even Lori's, right? That none of this needed to happen. None of this needed to happen. But Lori put herself in a position to make choices. And all of these choices led to the destruction of so many families and so many lives, including hers. And it didn't need to be this way. But for whatever reason, she absolutely thought that these were the best decisions that she could have made for her life. And these are the natural consequences for making decisions like that.
Big thank you to Sumter, South Carolina Rentals for the super sticker, which is what I think that is. This one says, Jeepers, Lori is looking rough. The importance of that is only because her conceit is so important to her. And yeah, it's going to be tough for her to look the way she once did inside that prison system, which she is undoubtedly heading toward. Huge thanks to Dr. John Delatorre, who is a PsyD, that's a doctor of psychology. He is based in San Antonio, but is everywhere, including on Court TV with Carmen and me last night. It was great to see him there. Dr. John, any final thoughts as we have received this verdict and we now know she is guilty on all counts? Final thoughts, please.
Yeah, I think it's time for to breathe a sigh of relief, but justice hasn't been completely settled yet, right? We still got one other person. So it's another one of those things where you got to prepare your emotions for another round of this if Chad decides that he's going to put up a fight.
Excellent point. And Tara Malik, a big friend of the show, a Boise, Idaho-based attorney who knows the Ada County Courthouse well. Your final thoughts into Dr. John Delatorre's point just now. Does Chad put up a fight, or does he come to some sort of realization that he has to make a plea deal?
I think it's going to be really interesting to see what path he chooses. I'm sure they're going to be him and his attorneys in deep conversations after the verdict today. And so, I think his best route would be to just plead guilty and throw himself on the mercy of the court at this point in time. But that would be my own advice to him, seeing how this evidence unfolded during the trial. But we'll see what path he chooses.
And Mabel Quintanilla, my friend from El Salvador, watching. I'm joining late, but I heard the verdict being read. Was that Colby Ryan sitting in the courtroom, Lori Vallow's son? Anyone know? I have not heard that, but a few people are talking about that. It was a very wide shot. But those are the kinds of things we are going to find out in the coming days, including, I am sure, because the networks are stalking them as we speak. They are stalking those jurors. Here's another one. Was that Colby sitting in the front row? But all the morning shows, Good Morning America today, they're all trying to gather up those jurors. We could hear potentially from them as soon as tomorrow or maybe never, but I think we will hear from them probably sometime next week, and we'll get all that reaction. We will bring it to you. And a quick reminder, Sunday night, I'm here with this woman, my mom, for a live show, 7 p.m. Eastern time with Greg Skordas to discuss that disturbing case out of Utah of the mother who murdered her husband. She had 3 kids with him and went on to write a book about grief and dedicated it to the very husband she's accused of murdering. So we will discuss that Sunday night. Until then, love you, America. Love you, Boise. Love you, San Antonio. San Antone. Thanks for joining, everyone.